surgeon slash housing secretary. And that's this guy.
Good evening. I'm Ben Carson.
He's leaving office as one of the longest surviving members of Trump's cabinet, but he's leaving behind a housing crisis. Americans owe $70 billion in back rent, and up to $40 million are looking at evictions when the moratorium expires. That order came from the Centers for Disease Control. It has a wider reach than the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which gave Carson the out to say he's doing what he can.
We obviously going to do everything we can.
I support helping renters in every way that we can.
We do everything that we possibly can.
But Carson hasn't been doing everything he could. The moratorium only helps renters who know how to use it. What Carson could have done is force landlords in HUD-supported housing to give tenants a written notice of their rights. What else Carson hasn't done publicly? Try to press Congress for more money.
In a time of a pandemic, while you've got levels of eviction potential that we've never seen before, the real question is, who is going to stand up and say, this is a national problem, it needs to be profiled? And that's something you would expect the HUD secretary to at least be raising or talking about. And the silence about that is really disturbing.
Carson hasn't just been about staying quiet. He's also been quietly failing, like when he tried to cut his department's budget 4 times and Congress refused.
Each and every time Congress has rejected those cuts in a bipartisan way, each and every time. So it's insanity that we would continue to push against what Congress has already been very, very clear about.
He also tried to change what his job means. HUD's mission statement is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. But in 2018, he tried to take out the sustainable and inclusive part. That failed too. Carson's record shows he's been more supportive of rolling back rules that are meant to help find homes for all. He scrapped an Obama administration rule that required towns and cities to look at their patterns of discrimination and how to fix them. Ideally, the rule is supposed to help low-income families get access to safe, clean neighborhoods. But Trump and Carson thought that was supposed to scare their suburban voters, because apparently bad things happen when you try to put affordable apartments in single-family neighborhoods.
The government no longer believes in building these large multifamily complexes with little forethought or little afterthought or any kind of thought.
But a lot of thoughts did go into making that Obama-era rule. How to destroy suburbs probably wasn't one of them.
It's a big lie. The Obama administration wanted to make sure that no matter who you are, that when you go looking for a house or an apartment, that you're treated the same, and that these long-time barriers that many communities put in place to people of color, low-income individuals, even finding housing opportunity there.
Just to be clear, the reason why many housing advocates who most likely informed some of these Obama-era policies suggested, why don't you try to diversify the suburbs, is because the suburbs that were formed as a direct consequence of white flights, which was a direct consequence of redlining, which was a direct consequence of discriminatory and racist housing practices, led to the suburbs in the first place. And if you're trying to find a way to address the long-standing inequities in our built environments, and knowing that still to this day, the suburbs are still highly desirable to live, in many respects because now suburbs are more affordable than inner city areas that have gone through the redevelopment / gentrification process, right? Where multi-family housing structures tend to still be. The response to that was bring the multi-family housing structures into the suburbs. Make zoning changes to the suburbs, no longer allow for solely single-family housing, which, by the way, has become synonymous with NIMBYism anyway. Find a way to diversify the already existing designated residential area, interfacing with the city, that allows them to have the same opportunities in terms of access to a city, right? as those living in a suburb allowed those lower income renters who rely on multifamily housing units to get similar treatments as those who are already in the suburbs, right? That was the response, in many respects, to find a way to undo the wrongs. Because of unfair housing laws and policies that directly led to the concentrations of poverty in low-income communities, that led to massive inequities in terms of job opportunities, educational attainments, likely to experience economic prosperity. And that's the reason why the big spearheaded attempts to address these ongoing issues of housing discrimination ended up agreeing that maybe it's best to try to diversify the suburbs, make the suburbs more inclusive because of the long-standing history of them being so goddamn exclusive, intended to keep the very same people out who would now be part of this new diverse ecosystem where everyone has equal shares and opportunity to the same community resources, despite their socioeconomic status, despite their own material conditions. And that is what Ben Carson was directly in opposition to. That prospect of equality that would have taken a really long time, political will, funding to even get to that point. It was just reimagining the suburbs as an all-inclusive community that would not discriminate or could not discriminate on the basis of wealth, status, race, ethnicity, all of the things that have been very much an element of oneself and their ability to determine if they would be subject to discrimination. You see? It's strange. It's strange that the reason why, and this is kind of off topic, but the reason why you have this fear, you have this myth that specific development will somehow drive down costs, right? Property value, appraised value, things like that. It's because there is built-in discrimination in the land valuation process. Who do you think is appraising the land? It's individuals who are predisposed to their own biases. So we don't even have a system that allows for objective assessment or valuation in determining the value of land. We never have. But it has become one of the largest myths that homeowners who want to be exclusive, who want to keep certain people out of their neighborhoods, they use that as their line of defense as to why they don't want to include people into their neighborhoods. They tout not in my backyard because they're worried that that particular type of development will somehow drive down their own property value, which is, again, it's absurdly untrue. That is the biggest myth of them all. The reason why it kind of sticks is because the exact opposite does happen. It has been proven to happen. What is the reverse, you might ask? Whenever areas are going through the process of redevelopment and reinvestment, and that property value tends to appreciate, the land valuation process does tend to indicate that areas that are not necessarily central to this redevelopment or this reinvestment that is going through land valuation indicating higher property value also see higher property value in neighborhoods directly adjacent to but not necessarily a part of that new redeveloped area, meaning that this is how gentrification by proxy and displacement happen. Because you can be in this older, rundown area, dispossessed, disinvested neighborhood, but right next to it, we are starting to see the gentrification occur. It's in full swing, right? Land appreciation through the roof, and that does tend to have a domino effect on the increase of property values in that neighborhood, directly interfacing with the brand spanking new one. And so that does happen, and that does lead to some instances of displacement too. Whenever property taxes rise, whenever costs of mortgages rise in this area, that's just like the next in line for gentrification, because it tends to happen in like little pocketed areas. That does have an effect in the exact opposite way, right? Where you start to see other costs of land increase because of the appreciation that's occurring in this highly newly developed or redeveloped area. And that's land speculation for you. Have I lost you, Chad? I'm sorry. I just kind of went off on a tangent. Let's finish this.
That those barriers were taken down.
Carson spent his last 2 years on other proposals that would have pushed more people into the street. One of them would have made it easier for homeless shelters to discriminate against transgender people. The other aimed to evict undocumented immigrants from public housing and throw out more than 55,000 children. Meanwhile, investigations found that properties run by HUD have been neglected. So if Carson really wanted to make sure all Americans had a comfortable place to live, he hasn't made it that obvious.
Obviously, we want to help people who are experiencing poverty. I want everybody to be taken care of, and my highest priority has been to ensure Americans don't lose their homes and to safeguard those at greatest risk of virus, including homeless and low-income communities.
Ben Carson was without a doubt the worst Secretary of HUD ever. It's a hill I'm willing to die on.